The rain was coming down in heavy sheets, drumming against the metal roof of Silver Crest Motors as Marcus turned into the dealership's employee lot. His faded blue sedan wheezed with every turn of the steering wheel. As he parked, the engine sputtered, coughed once, and died. The windshield wipers stuttered to a halt. He sat still for a moment, fingers gripping the steering wheel, letting the silence settle. Through the glass walls of the showroom, he could already see them watching. 3 salesmen in pressed shirts and slicked-back hair, standing near a display car. One of them, Tony, nudged the other and nodded toward the lot. "Look who finally showed up," Tony muttered loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Charity project's back, and now his junk heap needs CPR." Laughter followed, light and cruel. Marcus stepped out into the downpour, pulled his thin hood over his head, and walked with quiet dignity toward the side entrance. Each footstep sent water splashing around his worn shoes. He didn't look at them. He never did. Inside, the bright LED lights buzzed overhead as he clocked in and grabbed his mop from the janitor's closet. His movements were methodical, measured. He mopped the same way he breathed, with patience, with intention. At the reception desk, Emily, the youngest intern at the dealership, gave him a small smile. She looked no older than 20, tucked behind her computer and filing customer documents with mechanical precision. "Rough morning?" she asked gently. Marcus nodded once. "Just rain." She smiled again, sadder this time. "They shouldn't talk about you like that." He didn't reply. He never did. Upstairs, Brett leaned on the railing overlooking the showroom floor. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Marcus pushing the mop toward the service bay. "Make sure he doesn't touch the cars," Brett snapped to a mechanic walking past. "Last thing I need is a lawsuit because our janitor thinks he's part of the team." Marcus heard it. Of course he did, but kept mopping. His hands didn't shake, though something in his eyes darkened. By noon, he had finished the break room and the showroom and was cleaning the executive office hallway. The photographs on the walls showed smiling executives shaking hands in suits. One picture caught his attention. A young man, clean-shaven, shaking hands with a former CEO of a luxury car brand, Veldon Automotive. The young man's face looked familiar. Too familiar. Marcus stared at it for just a moment before turning back to his cart. He didn't belong on these walls. Not anymore. But he had once. He returned to his work silently, the mop gliding across the floor. Behind him, the laughter of the salesman echoed faintly, unaware they had just mocked the man who once stood beside giants. The rain outside had stopped. And Marcus, he was just getting started. The dealership was quiet at night, just the faint hum of the vending machine and the distant tick of the security system. Marcus moved down the hallway with a bucket and mop, his worn-out headphones clamped over his ears, leaking faint strains of Chopin. He preferred the stillness. It let him breathe. The floor beneath him gleamed under the fluorescent lights, but he scrubbed harder, as if trying to wipe away more than footprints. The music swelled, and with it came memories, sharp, bright, and cruel. In his mind, he was no longer the janitor at Silver Crest Motors. He was standing in a glass boardroom on the 20th floor of Veldon Automotive's headquarters, wearing a dark, tailored suit. Charts glowed on the screen behind him as he pitched an electric prototype that could have changed the industry. Applause echoed, handshakes followed, cameras flashed. Then came the scandal, money missing, a contract forged, his signature, doctored, but convincing enough. They didn't ask questions. They cut him loose. No trial, no headlines, just silence and shame. His name removed from the company he helped build. His brother, Darius, had warned him, never trust the boardroom. if you're not the one holding the keys. Back in the present, Marcus blinked the memory away and turned the mop. From the break room, muffled voices slipped under the door. "Can't believe they're still paying him." Brett's voice. "Like it's our job to fix his life." Another voice. Tony. "He drives a corpse on wheels and smells like pine sol. Why not just hire a scarecrow?" Laughter. Emily sat at a nearby desk, unnoticed behind a row of filing cabinets. Her phone was angled just enough to record the conversation. She didn't move, didn't blink, just watched and listened. Marcus passed the door and paused. He heard everything. His fingers tightened on the mop handle, but then loosened. No words, no reaction. Just a turn of the bucket and another pass down the hallway. They were mocking a man they thought they'd broken. But the real stains? The ones that rotted from within? They weren't on the floor. They were in the walls, the laughter, the complacency. And Marcus was done scrubbing them. Marcus stepped into his one-bedroom apartment just past midnight, water still dripping from the hem of his jeans. The lights buzzed weakly overhead. He placed the mop against the wall like a weapon at rest and slid his headphones off. The silence was almost holy. He opened an old metal drawer and pulled out a prepaid phone. No notifications, just numbers, static, and a single contact saved as L. As if summoned by the thought, the phone rang. He answered without a word. A man's voice, low, clipped, practiced, came through. "The papers are ready. The buyout's complete. As of 4:32 p.m. today, you are the majority owner of Silvercrest Motors. All assets transferred. Full discretion insured." Marcus closed his eyes. "Thank you. No one will know until you say the word. I'll let them bury themselves first." He hung up, placed the phone face down, and exhaled slowly. He didn't smile. He didn't even move for a minute. Just stood there, the weight of his silence heavier than any celebration. By morning, the dealership was bathed in golden light, the air thick with polish and fake warmth. Marcus walked through the front doors as usual, faded hoodie, slow steps, janitor badge clipped to his shirt. No one noticed. Tony was already shouting about a coffee spill in the client lounge. Brett barked orders from his glass office. Someone mocked the midnight cleaning fairy. Marcus watched them, listened. He walked past the luxury sedans lined up on the showroom floor, the same cars he now technically owned. He paused by the espresso bar and caught Emily's eye. She gave him a curious look. There was something different in him now. She just couldn't place it. He picked up his mop and headed down the hallway without a word. The game had already begun. They just didn't know he was the one moving the pieces. Emily found Marcus in the basement records room, hunched over a dusty shelf. The air smelled like old toner and forgotten paper. He didn't look up as she stepped in. "You wanted to talk?" she asked softly, still unsure why he'd slipped her a folded note during morning rounds that read, 10:45. Records room. Come alone. Marcus finally turned to her, holding a thick manila folder. He didn't hand it to her, just rested it against the filing cabinet. "I need someone I can trust," he said. Emily blinked. "Okay. I'm not just the janitor, Emily." She tilted her head. "I own this place through a blind trust. The papers were signed 2 days ago." Emily blinked again, twice this time. "What?" Marcus stepped closer, his voice calm but absolute. "Everything you see, the showroom, the lot, even Brett's office, it belongs to me now." "You're serious?" He nodded. "Dead serious." Her mouth opened, then closed. "But why tell me?" "Because you're the only one who sees people for who they are. Not what they wear. Not what they drive." Emily looked at the folder in his hand. "So? What now? I need a second pair of eyes. Someone to watch, listen, record. Quietly. No hero moves. She hesitated. What happens if they find out? Marcus didn't smile. Don't let them. Upstairs, Brett paced his office, holding a client's finance contract. His eyes narrowed as he spotted a faint smudge. Marcus's fingerprint. You've got some nerve-reading client files, Brett muttered to himself. You're done here. He slammed the contract down and stormed out. Back in the basement, Marcus turned to leave, pausing in the doorway. Don't trust anyone, he said, especially the ones who smile the most. Emily stood frozen, heart racing, mind spinning. The janitor was the owner, and the walls around her suddenly felt a lot more dangerous. The email hit everyone's inboxes just before lunch. Mandatory all-staff meeting, showroom floor, 12 p.m. sharp. No explanation, just Brett's signature, in bold. Marcus had just finished wiping down the front windows, his reflection ghosting back at him through the glass. Emily found him quietly folding his rag, her voice hushed. Something's wrong. He's up to something. Marcus didn't respond. He simply gave her a nod, calm, like a man watching the tide roll in. By noon, the entire staff gathered under the LED glow of the showroom lights. Salespeople leaned against luxury SUVs, mechanics stood with grease on their hands, and Emily hovered near the back, phone tucked silently in her pocket. Brett stood front and center, arms folded, oozing confidence. I want to address something we've all quietly tolerated for too long, he began, voice sharp. Stand up, Marcus. The room shifted. Heads turned. Marcus, still in his janitor uniform, straightened slowly but didn't move. Brett grinned. You've been poking where you don't belong. Client records, private offices. You even think you're one of us. A few uneasy laughs echoed. Brett pointed at him. But this is the end. We don't need liability risks sweeping our floors. You're fired. Effective immediately. Silence. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't argue. He just met Brett's eyes, unreadable. Then he turned, walked past the showroom's polished cars, past the wide stairs, and out through the same doors he'd entered 100 times before. Emily's heart hammered. Her hands shook. She recorded everything. She had to. Later that night, Marcus sat alone in his apartment, lit only by the soft flicker of a desk lamp. A worn photo rested in his palm, him and his brother Darius, arms around each other, years younger, laughing in front of the old Veldon headquarters. Darius had died in a crash 3 years ago, the same week Marcus was accused. Marcus traced his brother's face with his thumb. Almost there, he whispered. Outside, the rain returned, but inside, a storm far greater was quietly gathering strength. The morning sun was sharp and unforgiving, casting long shadows across the freshly waxed lot of Silver Crest Motors. A black SUV, sleek, silent, expensive, glided into the parking space directly in front of the main doors. Heads turned. Conversations paused. The door opened. Polished black leather shoes touched the ground first. Then came the tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, cufflinks gleaming like tiny knives. Marcus stepped out, calm and composed, as if the air itself bent around his arrival. He walked forward slowly, past the same salesman who'd once called him just the janitor, past the intern, who now stood a little taller. Inside, Brett was holding court as usual, mug in hand, barking orders about weekend sales targets. When he saw Marcus through the glass, his voice caught mid-sentence. "What the hell?" he muttered. Marcus entered the building with deliberate ease. The tap of his shoes echoed across the showroom floor. Brett stepped forward, trying to smile, but his eyes betrayed him. "Can I help you?" Brett asked tightly. Marcus stopped 2 feet away. "There's been a change in ownership," he said, his voice even. "Effective immediately." Gasps. A phone clattered to the floor. Brett blinked. "Excuse me?" Marcus reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a folder. Emily stepped forward from the back, camera phone already recording. He handed Brett the papers, signed, notarized, and final. "My trust acquired Silver Crest Motors 8 days ago. You've been working for me since Tuesday." Brett's face drained of color. He opened the folder but couldn't read a word. Some staff clapped, tentative at first, then stronger. A few others stood frozen, caught between disbelief and dread. Emily smiled faintly. Marcus turned slowly, addressing the room. "There will be changes and accountability, starting today." He locked eyes with Brett. "That includes you." The silence was deafening. Outside, the black SUV waited, with the engine still running, like Marcus had never planned to stay long. But he was home now, and he owned every wall they once cornered him against. By the next morning, the mood inside Silvercrest Motors had curdled into unease. The usual swagger was gone. Conversations were whispered. Jokes died quickly. Everyone knew Marcus was watching, but no one knew from where. He didn't storm through with threats or loud speeches. He simply observed, sat in his glass office, formerly Brett's, and pulled files, watched cameras, checked timestamps, listened. Then he started calling names. First was Greg, the sales rep who once called Marcus's sedan a rolling trash can. Marcus handed him a sealed envelope and offered no explanation. Greg opened it, turned pale, and stormed out without a word. Next was Carla from financing, let go after irregularities were discovered in several contracts. The third was a porter with a long string of off-camera comments, now caught in surround sound clarity. By noon, 3 desks were empty. Word spread fast. No one was safe. That afternoon, Emily knocked once before entering Marcus's office. She slid a USB drive across the desk. "Everything," she said quietly. "Racist slurs, falsifying paperwork, mocking disabled customers. Months of it." Marcus looked at the tiny drive like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Thank you," he said. His voice didn't rise, but something hardened behind his eyes. That night, he sent a secured folder to a state regulatory agency, attaching the USB evidence and his own audit notes. No cover-up, no silence, no favors. He was done fixing the rot. He was going to tear down the entire diseased foundation and rebuild something better, cleaner. Outside the dealership, the sky darkened again. Inside, justice had just begun to take inventory. Brett shuffled into Marcus's glass-walled office, the remnants of his arrogance drained, replaced by a twitching nervousness. His once powerful voice was reduced to a shaky whisper. "Marcus, look, I'm sorry. For everything. For the way I treated you. I was wrong." Marcus sat behind the desk, fingers lightly steepled, eyes steady and unreadable. He said nothing at first, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. Finally, he spoke, calm but piercing. "Would you have apologized if I were still just the janitor?" Brett's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. No words came. Marcus stood, folding his hands behind his back. "Remember that," he said quietly. "And remember who you ignored when you thought it didn't matter." Without waiting for a reply, Marcus turned and walked out. Later that evening, the city's glow dimmed beneath a blanket of clouds. Marcus climbed into the driver's seat of his battered old sedan, the same car that once elicited sneers and mockery at the dealership. He drove through quiet streets, past flickering street lamps and shuttered storefronts, until he reached a small neighborhood shelter. There, unseen and unnoticed, Marcus unloaded boxes of food, blankets, and supplies, donations made under a pseudonym. He handed a volunteer a small envelope. "For the shelter," he said softly. The volunteer smiled, nodding. Marcus slid back into his worn leather seat, staring at the cracked dashboard as rain began to patter on the windshield. No flashy cars, no spotlight, just quiet, steady purpose. He was no longer defined by where he started, but by the choices he made moving forward. Months passed, and Silver Crest Motors transformed. The gleaming sign above the entrance was replaced with a new one: Silver Crest Community Motors. Gone were the days of cutthroat sales tactics and backroom deals. Instead, the dealership now thrived as a place where fairness and opportunity mattered. Marcus remained mostly behind the scenes, his presence subtle but felt. He had established programs for job training, mentorship, and fair financing, opening doors that had once been slammed shut. Employees moved with purpose, and customers trusted the place. The toxic culture was replaced by respect, accountability, and hope. One sunny afternoon, Marcus stood near the edge of the lot, watching a group of teenagers tour the facility. A boy tugged at his sleeve, eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you the janitor or the owner?" the boy asked, tilting his head. Marcus chuckled softly, a warm smile breaking through his usual calm reserve. "Sometimes both," he replied. The boy grinned, nodding as if understanding something deeper. As Marcus watched the sun set behind the rows of polished cars, he felt a quiet pride, not from power or revenge, but from the legacy he was building. Not just a man who cleaned floors, or a man who owned buildings, but someone who had rewritten his story on his own terms. The lot was no longer a place of humiliation or secrets. It was a place of new beginnings. And Marcus? He was exactly where he was meant to be.